6:36, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. How are you, friends? Welcome on into your Monday. It is the 31st day of March of 2025. Matthew Hurtt is joining us. Matthew, you in Middle Tennessee today, or are you close to, anyway, our nation's capital?
Still up in the D.C. area with Easter right around the corner. I'll be in Nashville in a few weeks. I'm excited to get back and visit family.
All right. Let's get right to it. We had some good discussions last week on a number of different things. And part of the debate last week is how much money are we actually saving? How much money is Congress and Donald Trump and DOGE, how much are we actually saving? Because there does seem to be some debate over how much we're saving. So I'm going to replay this montage again for the people that just tuned in at 6:36. And then we're going to dissect each one of these comments and figure out who is right. This is Tim Burchett, Mark Green, and both congressmen, and of course Elon Musk. Listen.
I'm sure I'll catch hell for saying this, but we didn't. Trump won overwhelmingly because of the DOGE agenda, cutting this stuff out, and we're not cutting nothing out. So, yeah, I'm disgusted.
Yeah, we're not cutting enough, but we've got a 2 or 3 seat majority right now, and I'll take some cuts. I think they're looking at several $100 billion that are going to be cut in the reconciliation.
So far, we're making good progress, actually. So our savings at this point exceed $4 billion a day. I mean, unless we're stopped, we will get to $1 trillion of savings.
All right. So 3 sound bites, 3 headlines that made headlines last week. Mark Green, that was a conversation with me. And then you had Tim Burchett posting that video, and Elon Musk, of course, in his interview. I think that was with Bret Baier. So Elon says we are saving a ton of money. This is where we are going to start, Matthew Hurtt.
So far, we're making good progress, actually. So our savings at this point exceed $4 billion a day. I mean, unless we're stopped, we will get to $1 trillion of savings.
All right. So is Elon right?
Well, Dan, you and I have talked about this several times over the last few weeks. The DOGE cuts are cuts to spending that has already been appropriated. Yep. So Congress decides to spend the money, and on what? It then goes to the executive branch to execute that spending. And the President Trump, and the DOGE team have then cut back on some of that spending. But this is sort of a how the sausage is made conversation. Earlier this month, Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky pushed a bill that would codify DOGE, put it into law, and including cutting USAID. And 26 Republican U.S. senators refused to vote for it. Now, the good news is for Tennesseans, Hagerty and Senator Blackburn both voted for those, but there are 26 others, including Senate Republican leadership, that refused to pass a bill that would not even appropriate those funds for future spending. This is incredibly frustrating. Great news coming from Elon Musk and the DOGE team, but we don't see quite yet the structural change that many people voted for when they voted for Donald Trump last year.
I know Lee Zeldin, EPA, he's spoken a lot about clawing some of that money back. I think you and I spoke about this. If not, I know that I covered it, where specifically in the EPA, they dumped, I think it was billions of dollars, right? And they dumped it to some of these NGOs who were then going to, in my opinion, use it for nefarious means. And so Lee Zeldin came in because they knew that they lost. And so Lee Zeldin comes in and he starts noticing all of this money that has been dumped into these NGOs, and he's trying to claw it back. I don't know if he's actually been able to claw it back, but that's an example of what's going on.
A lot of these efforts are, the executive or the secretary of whatever the administration of the department would be has the authority to then decide what they call return to the Treasury. So going back to Senator Rand Paul, each Senate office gets an annual budget for staff and expenses, and you often see Senator Paul go make an announcement about how he's returned $500,000 to the Treasury. That is money that was appropriated for the use of his office. but he does not spend it, so he returns it to the Treasury. Now, it remains to be seen what actually happens to the financial balance sheets of the American government when that does take place. But it is, again, it's a step in the right direction, but it isn't quite as serious as what most Americans voted for when they voted for Donald Trump.
And this is sausage making, but all that stuff that they have found that is wasteful, then do they then turn around and make those adjustments on the next budget?
That's the important question. If Congress appropriates $3 trillion a year, every year or a little bit more each year, then those projects, those expenditures, those departments still get codified in every annual continuing resolution or budget document. So you actually don't eliminate the channel through which the money is spent. That means after President Trump leaves office, it will be the prerogative of the president and his administration or her administration to cut those things out. Unless it is codified in law, those projects and programs still exist. It's tantamount to your listeners having a bank account or a savings account with no money in it, but keeping the account open and still putting money into it on an annual basis, and maybe not spending what they thought they were going to spend the money on in future years.
All right, Tim Burchett.
I'm sure I'll catch hell for saying this, but we didn't. Trump won overwhelmingly because of the DOGE agenda, cutting this stuff out, and we're not cutting nothing out. So, yeah, I'm disgusted.
All right, so that is Tim Burchett. Now I want to play Congressman Mark Green, who told me last week that, yeah, we are cutting some.
Yeah, we're not cutting enough, but we've got a 2 or 3 seat majority right now, and I'll take some cuts. I think they're looking at several $100 billion that are going to be cut in the reconciliation.
So Congressman Tim Burchett says we ain't cutting nothing. And by the way, I'm not throwing stones at either one of these guys. I have immense respect for both of them, but it sounds like we're getting two different stories here. Green says that we are cutting a couple $100 billion at least, and Burchett says we're cutting nothing. What say you?
Yeah, both of these men are mostly right. And that's why, you look at what your politicians say, and this is why elected officials rarely answer a question directly. They tend to pivot to what many people call talking points. Congressman Green isn't wrong. Republicans only have a couple of seat majority in the House, and in some of those districts, they could face a tough re-election. We're seeing some consternation among the veterans community for cuts to the VA, and Tim Burchett is right as well. Looking at this list of, again, the 26 senators who refused to vote to cut USAID out of the budget, some of these individuals are, it makes no sense. It's, Tim Scott from South Carolina, Mike Rounds from South Dakota, Markwayne Mullin from Oklahoma. These are senators from conservative states who likely certainly wouldn't face a challenge from the right, a more conservative challenge, but likely wouldn't lose any ground in a general election. But on the House side, it is much more fluid, and as we see, we've got a couple of special elections, I think later this week, that are going to either make that House majority even slimmer, or give Republicans again that 4 or 5 seat edge that they have right now.
And that's where we will pick up the conversation with Matthew Hurtt, 645. Time to check the roads on WTN. Weather, high of 65 and cloudy today, but next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we have some severe weather expected. That is a developing story. We've got your complete forecast coming up at 7 on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk, 99.7 WTN. All right, Matthew Hurtt. So let's talk a little bit about these special elections. Now, we have some people who, on the left, they're screaming hallelujah and victory because Democrats have won 5 special elections since the November election. These are, local elections, state, Senate elections, that kind of a thing. But Democrats have won 5. And now, this week, we have 2 special elections in Florida to fill 2 congressional seats in Florida. We also have a big one in Wisconsin where the state Supreme Court, they have a special election as well. And depending on how this special election goes, if that court, the state Supreme Court in Wisconsin, remains liberal, then they can redistrict or gerrymander, they say, 2 Republican seats out of the House of Representatives and replace those with Democrats. And obviously that would have an impact on the 2028 election as well. This is a battleground state.
It would, Dan, and we have 2 different kinds of electoral landscapes. Wisconsin has basically been an activist testing ground for the last 14 years, since the days of Governor Scott Walker and Act 10, the right to work legislation. Both the right and the left have spent millions and millions, probably billions of dollars in each election. Conservatives just lost a majority on the state Supreme Court a couple of years ago, and we've seen what happens at the state level when that happens. Now, in Tennessee, you don't elect state Supreme Court justices, but in Wisconsin, it is very important, and the state has lurched left almost like Minnesota over the last couple of years as it pertains to court decisions. I've seen a number of my conservative friends and activist organizations on the ground up there, but places like Madison and Milwaukee are hotbeds of left-wing activism, and I suspect that'll be close. The polls show that it is neck and neck. But in Florida, we've got 2 congressional races that are reliably Republican districts, and this is a concern that I've mentioned on this show a number of times. Trump voters who came out in November of last year, what we call low propensity voters, people who only vote in presidential election years, or no propensity voters, those who are registered to vote and don't tend to vote at all, have to come out because the left is a little more energized at this point in the election cycle than conservatives. And so I think the 2 races in Florida, they don't look anything like the down-ballot special elections we've seen over the last couple of months. But the Wisconsin opportunity is a real test case for the remainder of the Trump administration and his success over the next 3.5 years.
How worried are you? Because there's an accusation among the right that Republicans are not paying attention. I know that you know who Scott Pressler is. And he took out the Republican Party in Pennsylvania because he was asking for help, and we ended up losing that special session. I think it was a state Senate seat. And we lost that by, I think it was under 500 votes. I think it was around 450, 486 votes. And Pressler came out and he took out the Republican Party. And he said, I asked for help and I didn't get any. Is the Republican Party, are they a little still too elated that we won and they're going to lose the ground game? Because what's happening basically, Matt, and I'll let you finish, but what's basically happening is the Democrats are doing a lot more with a lot less because they're winning these seats, but they're incredibly unpopular.
That's a great question and great framing. I think that Republicans are still in a honeymoon period. There's still a sense of complacency, and the converse is that Democrats and the left are fired up. Now, is some of that AstroTurf? We found out over the weekend that most of these Tesla dealership protests are AstroTurf, but that is driving a narrative. And as I've said on this show a number of times, it isn't in the individual poll or the individual election result. It's a narrative, and each win that the Democrats rack up from November 6th of last year headed into the midterms is something they can point to say, see, enthusiasm is on our side and people oppose the Trump-Musk DOGE agenda. And I don't think that's the case, but it will help craft a narrative where the people who aren't paying attention will tend to agree with them. And that's something that conservatives and Republicans in particular need to work hard to stop.
All right, Matthew Hurtt, how can people follow you on X?
I'm on X at Matthew Hurtt, MattheWHurtt.
All righty, 6:51 on Nashville's Morning News. Always a great perspective from Matthew. Time to check in with Joan Jones. By the way, the Super Text line is open, 615-737-9986, 615-737-WWTN. All right, Joan, what's coming up in the news at 7?
Well, the National Weather Service is heading to Humphreys County. They'll do some damage assessment there. Also, a traffic stop, and now a man is under arrest for sexual assault. Those stories and more coming up at 7 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.